What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Luttie's Look Back, episode number 25. I'm at a little bit of a different location here than we normally are. My name is Nick Luttrell, in case you didn't get that. Very exciting to be back with you guys for Luttie's Look Back. It is a March Madness special. As you can see behind me, the bracket unveiled. This is the men's bracket for the NCAA tournament. Arkansas way down here, the 10th seed in the tournament, facing off against the 7th seed Kansas. We're going to take a look at that later, but we've got a fun show today. As always, when you have March Madness, we're going to preview a lot of these brackets, including this one behind me, plus the NCAA women's side of things, Arkansas State making it as a 15 seed facing off against the 2 seed UConn. That'll be a tough draw from then. And then we'll talk about Arkansas State men's basketball as well. And then at the end of the show, please keep watching, because we're going to recap what a crazy weekend it was in the high school state championship ranks. But this is the big bracket. Before we get to a little bit more zoomed in, if you want to know my Final Four picks, I'm just going to give it to you real quick. This is not anything Razorback related, just real quick on here's the full bracket and what I think the Final Four is going to look like. It's a really tough ask to pick your Final Four this early in the game for me. I've just barely looked at this. But in the left corner in the West region, I think Florida is the best team in the country. I think actually they might win it all. I'm not going to say that yet because I just want to pick my Final Four picks right now. In the West region, I think Florida will advance to the Final Four. In the South, I got the 3 seed Iowa State out of the Big 12 making it to the Final Four. Auburn's playing really good right now, the number 1 seed. Actually, I take that back. Auburn has played good this season, and they're the best team in the country this season, but maybe not so good as of late. I think they've lost maybe 2 or 3 of their last 4 or 5. So I like Iowa State to advance, obviously, in their matchups. And then when they face off against each other in the Elite 8, I like them to win that game and advance to the Final Four in both of those games. In the East side of things, Duke, obviously one of the best teams in the country, and that's because of Cooper Flagg, who I think is going to be back for the NCAA tournament. It's still a little bit unknown in that regard, but either way, I don't think Duke will advance to the Final Four. I think the Alabama Crimson Tide will make it to the Final Four out of the East. And then for the Midwest, I'm also going with the 1 seed Houston. So pretty chalky as far as my picks. Not a ton of huge upsets that will make it to the Final Four. I think there'll be some Cinderella stories, but I don't think they'll make it to the Final Four, at least in my expert analysis. I think Houston is a really good team, really good defensively. And then, yes, I got 2 Big 12 teams, 1 SEC team, 2 Big 12 teams, and then 2 SEC teams that will be in the Final Four. That's my Final Four. If you want to know, if you need help filling out your bracket, because brackets are kind of due tomorrow, so you better get on that. If you need some help, there it is. There's my help for you, the best I can give. Let's take a look a little bit closer at the bracket now. In the bottom left, the West. Let's zoom in and look at that for the West bracket of things as we take a look at it. It's going to be Florida at the very top, and then all the way at the very bottom, St. John's and Arkansas facing off against each other. We'll even take a closer look here. 6 seed Missouri, 11 seed Drake, 3 seed Texas Tech, 14 seed UNC Wilmington, and then the big matchup for the Razorbacks, Arkansas against the Jayhawks, a rematch when the two faced off against each other in an exhibition game back in October. So we'll talk about that game in a second. St. John's, the 2 seed, a really good 2 seed, and then Omaha, the 15 seed. But I'm going to kind of fill out my bracket, at least in this bottom left corner of how I think things are going to go, specifically with the Razorbacks. Let's go to the top. I actually got Drake advancing in this one over the Missouri Tigers. Look, I love the SEC, and I do have SEC bias, but I think it's going to turn out to be not so hot for the Tigers. I got Drake advancing to this one to go on to the next round and make it on to the round of 32. They're a good team that not quite as good as they were last year, and they've certainly got a lot of different players this year. But Missouri, they're a team that has not been playing great as of late. They had a great start to the season, and they've certainly done amazing things from last year to this season to improve their team, but not good enough to win this game. I got Drake moving on to the round of 32. The bracket below it, Texas Tech and UNC Wilmington. I got Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, advancing also to the round of 32. Below that, the big one, Arkansas and Kansas. I'm going to give the nod to the Razorbacks to advance, and then St. John's as well to advance. We'll go ahead and advance that bracket and show you what I'm looking at here as far as the bracket is concerned. We'll keep on pushing through to go these next 3. You see my team Drake advancing over Missouri, Texas Tech advancing, Arkansas and St. John's. We'll stop right there for a second before we go to the next two, one at a time. And let's talk about this Arkansas-Kansas game. And we're going to talk about it more later, my three keys to what the Razorbacks can do to take down the Jayhawks. The first thing I want to say before we go back to the desk and talk about the three keys is this is going to be a completely different game than that exhibition game back in October. Yes, these teams or these programs have a lot of the similar players, but they also had their two big men that didn't play in this game. For the Razorbacks, Jonas Adu. For the Kansas Jayhawks, their best player, Hunter Dickinson, who consistently puts up a double-double every single night. He was one of the best players in the country a few years ago. He's regressed a little bit as of late, but I still think he's a really good player for this Jayhawks program. Both of these teams have such high ceilings. I just think Arkansas is going to come and be ready to go for this game against the Jayhawks. So that's why I have them advancing. So now, this is the round of 32 in the west part of the bracket. Again, we're going to talk more about the Arkansas-Kansas matchup in a few minutes, but let's fill out the rest of this, at least these final two games, to see who advanced to the Sweet 16. I got Texas Tech. I like the story of Drake taking down Missouri, but I really like the Red Raiders out of the Big 12 to advance and win in that game. So that advances them to there. And then Arkansas and St. John's, I don't think so for the Razorbacks. I got St. John's advancing. If you watched our streaming special yesterday, I kind of put Arkansas here and kind of showed you, what would happen if they won that game. But I was pretty confident that they weren't going to win that game. And what I basically said, and what I'm going to say again, it would take Arkansas's best effort to take down St. John's. It would have to come on a bad day for the Red Storm. R.J. Lewis and Kadari Richmond. If Arkansas advances to play this game, R.J. Lewis, Kadari Richmond, two really good guards for the Red Storm that I think are too good for Arkansas to compete with the Razorbacks. Again, Razorbacks, a great team, a great program, a great year. I think they fall in the round of 32, at least that's my prediction. I don't think they'll make it on to the Sweet 16. I just think St. John's is too good. So that's who I have advancing in my Sweet 16. I'll probably have St. John's end up winning that game and advancing to take on Florida. Let's take a step back and look back at what the full bracket looks like, at least in the west side of things, just so we get an idea of what the entire region that we're looking at. Again, Florida in the top portion of my bracket. I have them advancing all the way here to the Final Four. The Razorbacks, if they want to get to the Final Four, obviously they got to get past Kansas first. They got to get past St. John's. Then after that here, they probably have a matchup with Texas Tech, maybe a rematch with Missouri. They split that series earlier this season in the SEC. And then if you win one of those games, you advance here to the Elite Eight. Obviously, you have all these teams up here that you could potentially face, but I really like the Florida Gators. I think the Florida Gators are the team that's going to make it here, that if the Razorbacks make it to the Elite Eight, that's who they'll face off with against. But we'll have to see. I do think St. John's is just such a good program. Rick Pitino, the head coach from there, if you know anything about basketball, you know he's a Hall of Fame coach. But if I'm going to say that, I also got to say that about this Razorbacks team that's playing their best basketball right now. So if I look back on this a week from now and we see that the Razorbacks take down Kansas, they take down St. John's, and they make it to the Sweet 16, I'm not going to be that surprised, but I'll be pretty surprised. It'll be a really fun Lutties look back, I'll tell you that much. And the biggest thing that could happen, that could go Arkansas's way, is somehow, some way, the 15-seed Omaha taking down St. John's. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But crazier things have happened in March. 15 seeds have beaten the 2 seed in the past. Doesn't happen very often, but it could happen. So that's a little bit of my bracket analysis. Let's hear now from head coach John Calipari what he had to say yesterday about being in the NCAA tournament.
We're in. Anybody looking at this saying, we may not get in?
Recording stopped.
But I'm saying they were taking teams that we had beaten, and they were like, you start looking around like everybody was so confident we were in. I'm like, hey. But the whole point was get in. It's first year, getting things established, struggling early. And my teams have struggled early in the past, but not like that, because we hadn't played in the league like that. And where schedule will dictate some of it. But to stick together, to be in dark places yet overcome, to understand the battle that you have is with yourself. The life lessons that these kids take from this, is really, really good. And to be able to say, all right, we're in the tournament. Hard road. It may be the hardest, but so what? We're in.
All right, so good as always to hear from Coach Calipari there. He had a lot to say. That was just some of it, previewing a little bit of Arkansas's matchups with the Jayhawks. You see behind me what this game will look like as far as some of the details. This game going to be a little after 6 o'clock Thursday night right here on THV 11 or CBS, wherever you're watching it. It'll hopefully be a close game between the Razorbacks and the Jayhawks. I'm a little worried about it with this Kansas team. Before we move on, let's talk about Kansas and just how good they are. They're the 7th seed, and they are a really good team. As I mentioned, they were the preseason number 1 team in the country. They ended the year 21 wins, 12 losses overall, 11-9 in the Big 12, the net ranking of 20. In comparison, Arkansas's net ranking of 40. So quite a difference there as far as the net rankings are concerned. This team, kind of like the Razorbacks, has a really high ceiling. Obviously, there's the number 1 team in the country to start the season. We know that to be true. They've had a couple impact transfers that came into the program this year and haven't really been impact transfers. They haven't impacted the program as much as a lot of fans thought that they would for this Jayhawks team. But nonetheless, they've pulled off some pretty impressive wins this season. Think about the non-conference, a win against Duke and a win against Michigan State. Duke's a 1 seed in this NCAA tournament. Michigan State's a 2 seed. Those are 2 really good wins. Arkansas, while they've been really good this year at times, they haven't gotten over the hump and beaten a team as good as Duke or Michigan State. Their best win is Michigan or Kentucky. And both those teams are, I think, a 3 or 4 seed and a 5 or 6 seed, if I remember correctly. So it doesn't compare as far as the ceiling, as far as how close Arkansas has gotten this season to reaching that potential. And so, yeah, Kansas, they beat both those teams in the non-conference. They also almost beating a team doesn't really count, and we can talk about that all day for the Razorbacks. But for the Jayhawks, almost beating Houston twice is also pretty impressive. That's the number 1 seed. A number 1 seed, I think the number 3 overall team in the country right now. That's impressive. Again, that's the ceiling. That's the times that Kansas has looked really good this year. There's been other times where they haven't looked as good, and that's where you see their 11-9 record come into the Big 12. Some losses in there in the conference season, especially the loss to, I believe it was BYU about a month or 2 ago. It was their worst loss in the Bill Self era, and he's been there for a long time. He's been there for a long time as the head coach of the Jayhawks, and it was their largest margin of defeat ever for Bill Self. So you have some really bad losses, and kind of since then, you know, he's preached to turn things around, and they've done that. Since that game, they've kind of looked like a different team, have the Jayhawks. So it'll be interesting to see which Jayhawks team comes to play on Thursday against the Razorbacks. That's a little bit about Kansas. Briefly on their players, Hunter Dickinson is a very talented big man for this Jayhawks team. 7'2". He's like Big Z, but better. Can't shoot like Big Z, but has better post moves than Big Z. He averages a double-double. He's a guy that likes to play slow, whereas some of their guards like to play faster. So at times they've struggled with winning games this year because of that inconsistency with Dickinson. And just when you watch this game, just watch him try to run up and down the court. It's not too pretty. He doesn't look like he knows how to run. Now, granted, he is like 7'2", and if I was 7'2", it'd be like, it's a far way down. I don't know how to run. Maybe that's how he feels. I don't know. He can't really run, though. The guards, on the other hand, KJ Adams, DeJuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, those guys can play. They can play very quickly. But again, they're kind of slowed down by Dickinson at times. So those are some of the guard play, some of the forwards, the big guys to look out for. One last thing before we move on, and I know I mentioned this, I think, during the special yesterday, but the Big 12, yes, it's been a down year. And I think it's almost because the SEC has been so good that the Big 12 has been like, well, are they that good? I don't think so. They're still good teams. There's still good teams in this conference. And this is still Kansas. Not that I think Arkansas is going to go into this game thinking, oh, it's Kansas, we'll be fine, because they won't. This is the Jayhawks, the Kansas Jayhawks, a blue blood, one of the top 10 best programs of all time. Arkansas will come ready to play. But that's just something I wanted to know about the Big 12 as a whole. Well, it hasn't been a great year for the conference. They've still got some good teams, and it was still a good year, just maybe not a great year. So there's a little bit of a preview for the game. Let's move on to the three big things. And I know this isn't really, how I'm supposed to do my show. My show is called Luttie's Look Back. But I'm looking ahead for most of this show because of how big of a week it is that we have for all of our sports, and specifically with this game. So three things that I think the Razorbacks need to do to take down Kansas. Their first one, and maybe the biggest one, is slow down their big guy, Hunter Dickinson. I mentioned him just a while ago. He likes to play slow. The guards, on the other hand, for the Jayhawks don't. Arkansas, they need to slow down Kansas's big man, and he's good. He's really good. And he has some issues at times, especially on the defensive side, and I think that's where Arkansas can take advantage of him. You look at Big Z, Jonas Adu, get those guys going, which is kind of a preview to my third point here. Get those guys going, and Arkansas can upset the Jayhawks. Right now, Kansas is a 4.5-point favorite, I think, when the line opened up for this game. I still like the Razorbacks, despite those odds against them. But their first biggest thing, they got to slow down the big man, Hunter Dickinson. The second thing, force turnovers, and get out in the fast break. Kansas is a team that you got to take advantage of their offensive turnovers. If Arkansas can do that, if they can force turnovers, they need to get in transition, because Kansas, if I remember correctly, I didn't write it down, and silly me, I think their offensive efficiency rating isn't so hot, but their defensive efficiency is really good. So what does that tell me? That tells me Arkansas has to take advantage of some of those offensive mishaps. They got to get in transition. They got to get transition buckets, because we've seen it at times this season with the Razorbacks. They've struggled in those half-court offensive sets. Now, they've done better at times, but their best offense, defense leading to offense. Getting those turnovers, getting in fast break, using their athleticism, and dominating the other opponent. That'll be interesting to see, because Kansas is a team that has a lot of athleticism as well. But Arkansas is pretty battle-tested. They played in the SEC this year. Let's all remind people they played in the best conference in college basketball history this season, the SEC. So they're battle-tested. They're ready. They faced teams like Kansas this year, and I think they'll be ready to go for this game. But they got to get out in transition. They got to make their layups. They got to play with some intensity, and I think they will in this game. That's the second thing, and I talked about it just a while ago. The third big thing in order for Arkansas to win this game is you feed the big guys. And I know that was a point for my first one, is you slow down Dickinson for the Jayhawks. But I think on the flip side, you feed the big guys for the Razorbacks. Jonas Adu, my goodness, has he continued to play better and better for this Razorback squad. He was a guy who was, he was an all-SEC second-team player last season for Tennessee. And then this season, for most of the season, except for the past few weeks, he's been a dud. He's been a transfer. He's been kind of like these impact transfers for Kansas that really haven't done anything, that really haven't done much. And then the last few weeks, the last month, he has turned things around. And granted, I think he was hurt for a lot of the season. He wasn't 100%. Well, he seems 100% now. In that Ole Miss game on Thursday, he hit a post-move fadeaway jumper. I never thought in my life that I'd see him make a post-move fadeaway jumper. But Jonas Adu did that. And maybe we'll see a little bit more of that on Kansas. He continues to get better. And I think this team continues to get better too. So feed Adu and also get Big Z going. Ever since Adu's been getting better, Big Z's kind of not been getting so much better. I don't know if he's gotten worse, but he's just been a little quiet. And that's okay, because Adu's been playing so good. Z's been sitting on the bench. But I think they're going to need Z to make some plays. They're going to need him out there, because he has the size, I'm not going to say advantage, he has the size to match up with Dickinson. Dickinson 7'2", Big Z 7'2". Adu 6'11", so maybe a little bit shorter than Dickinson, trying to guard him on the defensive end. But put Big Z against Dickinson, I really like that matchup. Now Z, again, not great defender, pretty skinny. Dickinson has the muscle to get past him, but Z has the size to match up with him. So I like that on the defensive end, and I want to see Z get going on the offensive end. If Dickinson is guarding him, if Kansas is on defense, Arkansas on offense, you get Z out there shooting threes or pump fake the three and go around him. Hunter Dickinson's defense is not that great, as I've mentioned a few times. And I think Adu can take advantage of that, but also Zvonimir Ivicic can take advantage of that. Not only from beyond the arc, but down low as well. So those are the three big things that I have for Arkansas in order for them to pull off the upset to take down Kansas. All right, Arkansas State talk time. The women's basketball team, for the first time in program history, makes it into the NCAA basketball tournament. A lot to be proud of here for Coach and her team. The Red Wolves 21-10, the 15 seed, or a 15 seed, I should say, in the NCAA tournament, facing off against a 2 seed UConn, a UConn team that is always good, one of the best programs in college basketball history. Of course, only 3 losses on the season. Paige Becker is leading the way. We'll talk about her in a second. But this game, it's more about the Red Wolves made it here, and good job. I don't think they have a shot in this game, and I'll talk about that more later. Some quick details. This game is Saturday at 1 o'clock. It could be at noon. I might have written that down wrong. I'll be completely honest with you guys. It might be at noon definitely on ABC, but I'm pretty sure it could be at noon. That game in UConn's home arena in Storrs, Connecticut. But what does head coach Destiny Rogers have to say about her team making it into the NCAA tournament? Let's take a look.
We're excited. This is a dream come true to coach against one of the GOATs of women's basketball, but we're not scared. We know what we do, and no one's going to predict us to win this game. So we get an opportunity to go into Storrs and just have a ton of confidence, be free, and be proud of what we accomplished this year. So we're going to get back to work tomorrow, and we're going to prepare to win, and we truly believe in what we do. And we've seen them play a similar style in Tennessee, and Tennessee got them this year. So I'm sure that they'll go back to that film to try to get a game plan for us. But we feel confident about what we do, so I'm really excited for the opportunity.
Hey, you got to love the confidence, right? You want to be confident heading into this game. And I do think there's a few things that could potentially lead Arkansas State to pulling off the biggest upset in program history and the biggest upset of college basketball this season. Again, that is no disrespect. Arkansas State fans, don't hear me disrespecting the Red Wolves. They're a great team. They won their conference tournament title, and they deserve to win. They're the best team in their conference. But you compare them with a UConn team, and if you know ball, you know how good UConn always is. You know how good they are. But let's talk about the 3 keys that if they were to get a win, here's what they would have to do well. The first one, just like the Razorbacks, they'd have to somehow slow down their best player, and that's Paige Becker. She's a sensational player for this UConn team, has been for the past few seasons, averaging 19 points a game, 5 assists, and if she's not getting going, let's say you slow her down. I know that's one of my keys. You got Sarah Strong, the forward freshman for the Huskies, that it might be better, maybe not better, but is a really good player for this UConn team. But A-State, they got to slow down Beckers. It starts with her, it ends with her. They have a lot of weapons outside of Paige Beckers, but it starts with her. She's not only the best player on the team, she's one of the best players in college basketball. Got to figure out a way to slow down her. And it's a good thing because A-State does take a lot of pride in their defense. And that kind of leads into the second point of what they need to do to get the win. The defense, they got to bring a lot of pressure. This is a team that forces a lot of turnovers in the Sun Belt Conference this season. They put that pressure on teams, and it really affects them. Now, UConn's a team that's probably seen that pressure. But as Coach Rogers mentioned, they didn't handle the pressure well against Tennessee early on this season. So there's that to look out for, but maybe that kind of helped prepare them possibly. And A-State's not to the level of Tennessee women's basketball program and team this year, but they got a good defense. Their defense has to bring a lot of pressure. They have that full court press, and it works a lot of the time. And they got to bring the pressure. That's how the only way they're going to win this game is to turn over UConn. The only other way they're going to win this game, in the third thing of my 3 big things for them to win, is shoot a lot of threes and make a lot of threes. And it's a good thing because they are first in the country, not just the conference, they're first in the country in 3-point shots a game. And they're also first in the country in 3-pointers made per game. They almost make 11 a game. So that's really impressive. When you look at upsets in terms of March Madness, one of the biggest things I look at, defensive pressure. Can you turn the other team over? Can you get them rattled? Can you pressure them? And can you just make some crazy 3-pointers? And Arkansas State shoots a lot of them. They make a lot of them. And they're going to have to make a lot of 3-pointers in order to pull off the upset. Not impossible. Very unlikely, but not impossible. They got to make all their threes. And I think the game plan is you shoot a bunch of threes. Again, you shoot a bunch of threes, you make a bunch of threes. Because that's their only hope is to shoot from beyond the arc to make those threes and to potentially pull off the upset against the Huskies. So that's the women's side of things for Arkansas State. To the men's side, let's take a look at the full bracket. They did not win their conference title, unfortunately, over the weekend, or I guess it was earlier last week. But they did receive a bid into the NIT for the first time since 1991. Again, this is kind of a tough bracket to look at, so if you need to stand up, stretch your legs, just walk a little closer to your TV screen. It's in about the top left region, I should say, of your screen is where Arkansas State is. They'll be facing off against St. Louis. That game's actually tomorrow night, so really quick turnaround for the Red Wolves. They've got a home game. I'm surely packed and rocking. There's a lot of teams that make the NIT that miss out on the NCAA tournament that don't want to play in the NIT. Arkansas State, meanwhile, they kind of knew they weren't going to make it in the NCAA tournament. They're probably really excited, really pumped up to make it in the NIT tournament. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure they wish they were in the big dance, but they're not. That's the reality, and that's where Arkansas State is at. And let's actually zoom in and take a look a little bit closer at where they are at. You see at the very top of their bracket, SMU would be the team they would potentially face off in, and I think what would be the Elite Eight. But obviously it starts with their first game against St. Louis tomorrow night. If they win that one, most likely facing North Texas and Denton, Texas. We'll see if they can do that. So we'll move on to our final thing, UCA women's hoops. They fell to FGCU in the finals of their conference championship over the weekend, but they'll be in the WNIT, and although the bracket hasn't come out yet, it'll come out later today. I do like their chances because UCA is such a good team. Only struggles they've had this season, give or take a few games earlier on in the year, is to Florida Gulf Coast. And that's the team they lost to in the regular season and they lost to in the conference finals. But I like their chances because I think this Sugar Bears team is really good. They have a lot to be proud of. It was a really good season for them. And I don't think they're done. They've qualified for the WNIT. And again, if you're not a sports fan, if you're, well, surely by this point, if you're watching the show and you're not a sports fan, I'd be concerned for you. But thanks for sticking around. But if you're not a sports fan, what the WNIT and the NIT essentially is, and I want to say this with all due respect to the teams that are in it, is it's a backup. It's a backup tournament. The teams that don't make the big dance, the NCAA tournament, they have these other tournaments where postseason play can still be played, especially by a team like UCA, who had a really good season, but just ran into a buzzsaw that is always Florida Gulf Coast. So they'll get a chance to keep playing basketball. And that's fun, right? You want to watch them keep playing basketball. Hopefully they'll have some home games upcoming this week. We'll have to see, but that is all the talk for UCA and college hoops. All right, we're moving on to our final segment, high school hoops. The state championships, they happened this weekend, and they were pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. A lot of great games going down in Hot Springs. If you missed them, I'm going to recap 4 games, just of the top 4 and a lot of our coverage area as far as our teams that won. So we'll start, as you can see behind me, in the Class 6A redemption for Bryant. After falling in the state title last season, they do it this year. They take down Springdale 69-59. A lot of great players to talk about and look out for this Bryant team, but it starts with Kellen Robinson, the MVP of this game. 25 points for the Hornets, 4 of 6 from the free throw line. Only 1 3-pointer, but it was a pretty big one in this game to add on with 6 rebounds. Turned the ball over a few times, but that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Robinson, a terrific player for this Hornets team, and really going to be fun to watch going forward. He's committed to play at Little Rock. He's going to play with his brother KK Robinson next season for the Trojans. Darrell Walker, the Trojans head coach, was in attendance actually for this game, watching Bryant get the win. But it wasn't just Kellen Robinson. You got to give a shout out to probably the man of the weekend, Caleb Tucker. Only 5 points, but it was this shot right here that gave the Hornets their first lead of the second half. He banked it in at the buzzer, and man, what an impressive shot there for Mr. Tucker, the football hero, making that play right there. So Tucker, just a phenomenal shot right there. And then down the stretch, Bryant was able to pull ahead and take down Springdale. Some other notable players. You got to talk about R.J. Newton, R.J. Young, Ryan Young. This team was destined for good things, and they learned a lot throughout the course of the year. They weren't like some of the other teams we might talk about, Springdale, where they only have a few losses this year, and they were supposed to be the favorites all season. No, they had some hardships. They had some losses, and they rebounded, and they learned from those losses. You learn a lot from losses. This is kind of the theme of some of these state championship teams. And Bryant certainly learned a lot from theirs last year. They learned a lot from theirs this year, and it ended with not a loss. It ended with a win. So really special to see the Bryant Hornets are champions of the Class 6A. That is Class 6A. Let's go on to the Class 5A now. Benton, oh my goodness, what a game this was. Benton taking down Maumelle 58-57. This one was absolutely insane. The Panthers, the Benton Panthers, yeah, they were down 5 with 20 seconds left. 20 seconds left in this game, down 5. Somehow, some way, they made the comeback. Unfortunately for Maumelle and Hornets fans, if you're out there, maybe just mute this or maybe skip ahead about a minute and a half. This was a tough pill to swallow if you're a Maumelle fan. On the flip side, it was a great pill to swallow if you're a Benton Panther fan. And it was a crazy ending that saw Terrion Burgess make the game-winning shot with a couple seconds left. And then the Hornets go down the court, have a half-court heave that just missed off the left side of the backboard. A tough look for Hornets, but an incredible win for Benton. Terrion Burgess, 18 points, 5 rebounds, a really special player for Benton, one of the top players in the state. So it was fun for me personally to get to watch him. I think I was maybe more impressed with Harrison Pickett for this Benton team. 22 points, 3 3-pointers that came at really big times for Benton, and they just kept clawing their way back into this game. While the Maumelle student section was celebrating and thought they won, Benton was going down the court, making a bucket, and winning the game. So again, tough look, heartbreak from Maumelle. One shout out, one of the players I noticed that was insane for Maumelle, Markellon Rochelle, 18 points, 11 rebounds. This guy had like 4 dunks. He was really impressive. So the young fella certainly has a really bright future from Maumelle, especially doing that against Terrion Burgess, one of the best players in the state. So Mr. Rochelle, you should be really proud of yourself because you put up a really great performance from Maumelle. But a tough look there for Maumelle, but a win as Benton is crowned champions of the Class 5A on the boys' side. To the Class 4A on the boys' side, Mills taking down Morrilton 56-51. Morrilton playing with heavy hearts after losing a teammate early on this season. And man, did they play for him. And man, did they make it far for him. All the way to the championship game, but just not enough against a Mills team that was consistently the best team, I think, in the Class 4A all season long. And they didn't show it for the first half of this game. They scored, check my math here, 16 points in the first half, 40 points in the second half. So they came alive in the second half to take down Morrilton, to come back and beat them, and it was such a balanced effort. This Mills team, I've said it a couple times on the show, I think, they've got a balanced effort of so many guys that can make you pay. Marshall Walls with 19 points, Zaylen Rowland with 10 points, Anthony Hester, 13 points. I'll come back to him later. Mosiah Curry only 4 points, but a plus-minus of 15. So he affected the game. He played most of the game, I'm sure, but he affected the game when he was in there, which is always a cool stat to think about. The plus-minus essentially means you had 15 more points in the other team when Curry was on the court. And then going back to Anthony Hester, this guy had a dunk third or fourth quarter that was, it was kind of embarrassing and kind of ugly. And he hurt himself, it looked like pretty badly. Thankfully, it was just a wrist injury. Then he comes back a few minutes later, drains a three-pointer, and then a few minutes after that, he's like, why not another one? Like from way downtown. Hits 2 3-pointers in the span of a few minutes, and that really gave the Comets some momentum. They were down 11 points at one point in this game. They came back to win the game. And again, they were second-half team in this one. They played so much better in the second half. And all due respect to Morrilton, let's give credit to Isaiah Templeton, 19 points. Ty Wright, 12 points. Both those players really good. both those players that are going to be back for the Devil Dogs next season, so watch out for them in the Class 4A for next year. But a Mills team that was just better than everybody. Again, I said it last week, they're one of the best teams in the state regardless of classification, and they deserve what they got, which was champions of the Class 4A on the boys' side. Finally, on the girls' side, unfortunately for Pulaski Academy, their perfect season comes to an end. A tough loss for them. DeQueen looked like they lost to DeQueen 62-54. DeQueen looked like the better team for a lot of this game. They had a lot of, I talked about with Arkansas State, they had a lot of pressure and press that affected Pulaski Academy that I don't know if the Bruins were really ready for. And DeQueen also had twins, Jesse Lyle and Shaylin Lyle, that were incredible. They only scored 11 points and 12 points and each made a three-pointer, but both of those ladies are very good for this DeQueen team. I was very impressed. It was my first time watching them. Both of them were really good. That led them to an 8-point win over Pulaski Academy. But on the flip side, Greenlee Elmore, 25 points, 11 rebounds. Randy Stewart, 16 points, 9 rebounds. Really impressive what this Pulaski Academy did this season. They didn't lose in a game the entire year and then lost in a state championship game. So just a heartbreak there. But not a lot, or nothing I should say, that they should hang their hats on. It was their best season in school history, and really impressive because it was the first year for head coach Becky Yarborough, one of the premier head coaches in all of Arkansas, coming over from Star City this season and doing a really good job with this Bruins team. And I think a few of those players are going to be coming back for next season. I should have written it down, but I can't remember exactly. But this team has a bright future, whether it's with these players or not. With Coach Yarborough, who has a winning mentality, they have a really bright future. So that is all the state championship talk from Class 4A, 5A, and 6A. We'll finish up quickly with some Arkansas baseball and softball talk. Baseball over the weekend taking the series win over number 13 Ole Miss 2-1. They lost Friday, then they won Saturday and Sunday. Some pretty crazy games. Friday with a 10-6 loss, Saturday 12-3 in dominating fashion. I think it was the 7th or 8th inning, or maybe the 7th inning, they scored like 7 runs, ended up winning 12-3. And then yesterday, an absolute thriller. Back and forth they went with the Rebels. When you thought they were down and out with it, when you thought the game was over and they had won the game, you thought wrong on both of those times. Arkansas, they score a couple runs in the top of the 9th. They were down to their final out. They score a couple runs in the top of the 9th, and they get the win. And it's a series win. It's a road series win in the SEC, and that's something the Hogs should be really proud of. So baseball gets the win in the series over Ole Miss. Arkansas softball, not as hot. It was close, though. I will give them credit. They played the number 1 team in the country, the Oklahoma Sooners, and they lost all 3 of those games, but they kept it close at times with the Sooners team that is going to be going to Oklahoma City in the College World Series this season. There's no doubt about it. They've been consistently in the College World Series. So I'm really curious to see what kind of how other teams perform against the Sooners going forward. Because while Arkansas got swept by them, again, they put up a good fight. They didn't get blown out by them, really. It wasn't really, you look at the first 2 games, they did, but it wasn't until like the 6th or 7th inning where they just kind of fell apart. So I don't know what that's on. I don't know if that's stamina, if that's putting them in the wrong pitcher at the wrong time, or maybe needing to take out a pitcher at a certain time. I don't know what that is. But I do know that this Arkansas softball team is just fine, and they're a really good softball team. So we'll see what they can do going forward. That is all the talk you could ask for and more here on Luttie's Look Back, episode number 25. We had a lot for you today, so thank you for watching or skipping through or whatever you did. It's been a joy and an honor. It was the 25th episode. We are a quarter of the way to 100. Can I make it to 100? We'll have to see. It's been really fun. Thanks so much for watching Luttie's Look Back. We'll see you next week.